On a frosty February night in 2001, in a small well-to-do suburb in northern Italy near Genoa, a 16-year-old girl came screaming out of her family villa, covered in blood, terrified, and running for her life. She hammered on the doors of her neighbors, finally finding a safe haven as she managed between sobs to implore her rescuers to call the police. Intruders had broken into her home and killed her mother and brother and tried to kill her as well. And she was worried they would kill her father, who was on his way home from work. The intruders were two Albanian men, the young teenager explained, and she explained this again later to police. This information raced along media channels to every corner of Italy, fanning the flames of immigrant panic that was rampant in the early 2000s. But almost none of this was true. It was a frosty February night. A teenage girl was covered in blood, and her mother and brother were murdered. But the details that were needed to complete the story would disturb Italians for the next 22 years. This is the story of Erika and Omar, known across Italy as Il delitto di Novi Ligure. Hello and benvenuti to Italian True Crime. Today's story is shocking even by true crime standards. Consider this a trigger warning, as the story of Erika and Omar is violent and gruesome, and it deals with matricide and fratricide, a very grim subject. Erika Di Nardo was born in Novi Ligure on April 28, 1984. She was born into a well-off family living in a prosperous town of Piedmont in northeastern Italy near Genoa, not far from the sea. She was born to Francesco Di Nardo and Susanna Cassini. Francesco, her father, was an engineer and manager at Pernigotti. We have to take a moment here to speak about Pernigotti. Founded in 1860 in the town of Novi Ligure, Pernigotti is an Italian manufacturer of chocolate, specializing in high-quality gianduiotto, which is chocolate with hazelnut and famous in this part of Italy. It has been said that for Italians, Pernigotti is chocolate as Ferrari is to cars. Erika's mother was Susanna Cassini. In Italy, women keep their last name when they marry, and as children take the last name of their father, mothers almost never have the same last name as their children. Susanna was known as Susie. She was an accountant, though she had left her job to stay home and raise her children. She was only 25 years old when Erika was born, and at the time of her murder, she was 41. When Erika was 5, the Di Nardo family welcomed a second child, a boy named Gianluca. He was only 11 years old at the time of the murders. By all accounts, this was your typical well-to-do Italian family. Dad with a nice job, mom a housewife and stay-at-home mom, raising kids and making good food, helping with homework, and trying to raise good kids. Gianluca, the little brother, looked up to his big sister and was adored by his parents. He was a very brave young boy for his short 11 years, as you will soon find out as the story unfolds. Erika had a boyfriend, Mauro Favaro, known by all as Omar. Omar was born on May 15, 1983, and was 1 year older than Erika. His parents ran a small bar cafe in Novi Ligure, and from all accounts, he did not want for anything. He did well at school, as did his girlfriend Erika, and both had no history of bad behavior. That said, Susie was not thrilled about Erika's relationship with Omar. Susie felt that Erika was going in a bad direction, that the new friends she was spending time with, including Omar, were a bad influence. In fact, the relationship between Erika and her mother was experiencing a rough patch. Susie was constantly on Erika about her grades, her behavior, her friends, her boyfriend, and accusing her daughter of doing drugs. The communication between the two had deteriorated into accusations, yelling matches, and tantrums. Anyone who has raised children and survived the teenage years has had that conversation either with a spouse, family member, or close friend. The conversation circles around the question, what is normal teenage behavior? The teenage years are a transition from childhood to adulthood, and it is normal for teens to start to individuate from their parents. They are seeking independence, and this could lead to increased conflict within the home, especially if one or more of the parents is attempting to stifle a teenager's independence. From all accounts within the DiNardo family, the parents had given Erika quite a bit of autonomy. So much so that Erika and Omar spent 4 hours together in Omar's bedroom nearly every afternoon after school. On February 21st, 2001, at about 7:30 p.m., Susie and Gianluca returned to the family home in Via da Catra in the Lodolino district of Novi Ligure. They were coming back from Gianluca's basketball game. Erika was at the family home already, whereas her father, Francesco, Susie's husband, had decided at the last minute to join friends after work for a friendly football match and had been planning to come home later than usual. An hour later, Erika DiNardo, just 16 years old, was running down her usually quiet street just before 9 p.m. when most Italian households would be cleaning up from dinner. She was screaming and covered in blood. "Oh God, please help," she yelled to her neighbors and to anyone listening. The police arrived swiftly, minutes later, bursting into a crime scene they will not easily forget. Susie, the mother, was slumped on the kitchen floor in a widening pool of blood. She was unrecognizable, repeatedly slashed and stabbed. Gianluca, only 11 years old, was in a bathtub upstairs. If anything, his wounds were worse. It was overkill. It was far too much. Mother and son were stabbed a total of 97 times. The suburban villa in Novi Ligure, the small, prosperous town, was a slaughterhouse, gasped one detective. A wooden-handled 15-centimeter kitchen knife was recovered. Of the killers, there was no sign. All police had to go on was Erika's description of the intruders, one in his 40s, one in his 20s. They did not speak, but had dark hair and sallow skin, typical of people of Slavic descent, of illegal immigrants. Word spread, and within hours a furious crowd surrounded the mayor. For months, for years, there had been warnings about roving Albanian thugs, yet the mayor did nothing. The police did nothing, and now Susie and Gianluca were dead. As Erika was shown police photos of Albanian criminals, the cry went up around the country. Newspapers demanded a crackdown on illegal immigrants. The Northern League, a far-right political party and part of the center-right opposition coalition, announced a series of demonstrations. Liberals squirmed and conceded that, yes, something would have to be done. In the meantime, investigators were doing their jobs, ignoring the uproar and getting down to work to make sense of the crime scene. They made several important discoveries early on. Number 1. Erika said she ran to her neighbors, but bloodstained footprints clearly showed she had walked. Number 2. Erika had identified the photo of an Albanian man who police quickly tracked down. And when they did, they discovered that he had been nowhere near Novi Ligure that night. Number 3. Erika said the intruders were thieves. However, nothing was missing. In fact, the doors and windows of the house showed no signs of forced entry. Number 4. The weapons used were 2 knives, part of a set found in the DiNardo kitchen. Number 5. The family dogs usually barked at normal things like strangers. However, they hadn't barked at all that evening, according to the neighbors. The only thing that stood out was one neighbor who had seen Omar drive by in a moped with bloody trousers at about the same time Erika was running out of her home. Literally less than 24 hours after the murder, the Carabinieri were so suspicious of Erika and Omar, they summoned them officially to the Carabinieri barracks, where they left them alone for a few hours in a room with hidden cameras and microphones. The two began to discuss the identikit that the girl was supposed to draw for the police, and at a certain point, Omar reproached Erika for having drawn a face too similar to him. During their dialogue, overheard and seen by the police, the couple reasoned between them about the possibility of being discovered, deciding to flee if suspicions fell on them. The hidden cameras also filmed Erika, who, intent on recalling what she had done that evening, actually mimed the gesture of stabbing, all of this caught on police video. Omar on the audio addresses his girlfriend as murderer and spoke of fears of the risk of a heavy criminal sentence. Erika at one point asked Omar if he had enjoyed killing Susie and Gianluca. Finally, Erika reminds Omar to dress well at the funeral of their victims, which was scheduled for the next day. On February 23rd, the following day, around 7 p.m., the two teenagers were definitively placed in custody and then taken to the Ferrante a Porti juvenile prison in Torino. Once Erika's version of events was revealed as a lie, Erika and Omar began to accuse each other. Erika and Omar turning on each other meant they were both now telling versions that may have had aspects of the truth, but the versions were contradictory in nature and incomplete. One officer noted that the only point their stories had in common was that at one point Erika handed a juice to Omar. This meant that the Parma RIS became involved to create a reconstruction. The RIS is the Raggruppamento Investigazione Scientifiche, or the Scientific Investigation Department. The RIS believed that shortly after the mother arrived home, an argument began in the kitchen between mother and daughter. The cause centered around the bad grades Erika had received at the Collegio San Giorgio, a school she had transferred to after 2 very disappointing years at the Amaldi Scientific High School. The argument degenerated into accusations about the bad company Erika was keeping and how the mother believed this was the root of her recent problems at school. At this point, Erika grabbed a knife and she dealt the first blow to her mother. Omar, who had been hiding in the bathroom on the ground floor, ran to the kitchen to help Erika. He was already wearing gloves, and he brought a pair with him for Erika to put on. The couple was now able to overpower Susie. One of them covered her mouth with a hand, and together they began to stab her. The mother struggled, and in an attempt to escape the homicidal fury of the two, she crashed into the kitchen table, which broke in two from the impact. The teenagers grabbed her again and continued to swing and stab until they were sure they had killed her. In total, Susie Cassini received 40 stab wounds. Omar claimed that before dying, Susie cried out to her daughter that she forgave her and begged her to spare her brother. Meanwhile, Erika's younger brother Gianluca was in the upstairs bathroom preparing to take a bath. He heard the commotion below and ran downstairs, but he was not able to save his mother against his sister and her boyfriend, having instead to watch helplessly this awful scene. Sadly, the couple did not heed Susie's plea to spare Gianluca. When they realized he was watching, they turned their fury against him. Gianluca was stabbed by his sister. A splash of his blood was found on the kitchen telephone cable. The teenagers then forced Gianluca upstairs, as evidence of drops of Gianluca's blood were found in the stairwell. In their frenzy, the two killers left bloody footprints on the stairs and handprints on the wall, as well as blood droplets caused by the knives. Erika pushed her little brother towards the bathroom, trying to calm him down and telling him she wanted to help him wash and dress his wound. But Gianluca was in a panic, and he sought refuge in Erika's room. With no way out, he was stabbed repeatedly. Meanwhile, to prevent the neighbors from hearing the screams, Erika turned up the volume on the stereo. On the knob, traces of blood were detected. It is speculated that the couple may not have planned to kill Gianluca, but his unexpected presence at the scene of the crime and his reaction made him an uncomfortable witness. Gianluca, with the little strength left, tried to escape, seeking refuge in the bathroom, where he was trapped by the couple. Initially, Erika tried to poison him by making him drink rat poison, traces of which were later found near the bathtub, on the upstairs landing, and down the stairs. She then threw him into the tub full of water and tried to drown him. In the frenzy, both attempts failed. While Gianluca continued to defend himself desperately, biting Omar in the area of the first interdigital crease of his right hand, causing him to bleed. At this point, still having one of the knives used to kill Susie with them, the two started stabbing Gianluca again. They stabbed him for the next 15 minutes until he finally succumbed, the bravest boy in the world, with 57 stab wounds. Once the crime was done, the couple returned to the ground floor, where an argument broke out between the two about the advisability of waiting for the return of Erika's father to kill him too. Erika insisted they finish the job, but Omar felt too tired. He complained of his hand injury, and he refused. At this point, the two made an effort to clean up, without much success. However, they did wash the weapons to try and erase fingerprints. One knife was thrown in the trash along with a pair of gloves, while the other remained in the house on the kitchen floor. At 8:50 p.m., Omar left the house through the main door and went off on a moped. He was seen by a neighbor who, noticing his bloody trousers, informed the Carabinieri the next day. On December 14, 2001, Erika and Omar were sentenced by the Juvenile Court of Torino to 16 and 14 years in prison, respectively. The usual appeals were made, but the original convictions were confirmed first by the Torino Court of Appeals on May 30, 2002, and then definitively by the Court of Cassation on April 9, 2003. The defense attempted to claim mental illness. However, the teenagers were declared capable of understanding and will. The claim of mental illness did not stand. Arguments were made during the investigation and trial that Erika and Omar were drug users, and many thought, considering the ferocity of the murders, that this may have been drug-fueled. Particularly, it was thought they had been using cocaine during the murders. However, the investigators ascertained that while it was true on some occasions the two teenagers had used cocaine, they were not considered to be addicts, and it was excluded that they were under the effects of any drugs on the night of the murder. To say Italians followed this case closely would be an understatement. First, they had to come to grips with the immediate reaction of many when it was thought Albanians were to blame. It is telling that Erika chose to blame immigrants. Linking immigrants to crime had been a national pastime. Things have improved immensely 20-plus years later, but in the early 2000s this was a hot topic and very political. Silvio Berlusconi came into office a few months later, leading the center-right whose platform was cracking down on immigrants and crime. The center-left was ruling at the time and appealed for tolerance, but they were soon voted out. When it came to light that Erika had made up the entire story about the two Albanian men, Justice Minister Piero Fassino summed up the newfound sense of unease. "I believe that someone should beg the pardon of the immigrants," he said. "The level of incivility we've seen in this country in the last 48 hours should make us all reflect." Once Italy had moved on from immigrant panic, they were now very concerned about this apparently normal family with its typical-sounding teenage parent challenges, turning into one of the most gruesome double homicides Italy has ever seen. The mayor of Novi Ligure said in an interview, "We have gone from one horror to another." It comes down to motive, and criminologists and psychologists for years have been dissecting this case looking for motive. These two teenagers had everything. They had good homes, a good education, and they had each other. The national debate that ensued seems almost quaint through the lens of 2023. But at the time, back in 2001, the Italian public lamented about the nature of the text-message generation of alienated Italian youth. Is there a malady at the root of family life? An emptiness in adolescence? A fraying moral fabric? Psychologists, sociologists, and psychiatrists have been called on to explain. "We have met the enemy and discovered that it is ourselves," said a Corriere della Sera article. Francesco DiNardo, husband of Susie and father of Gianluca, has been plunged into a torment of Greek tragedy dimensions since the only family member left with whom to share his grief is the daughter who killed his wife and son. He has steadfastly stuck by his daughter. He forgave her, and she is all that he has left. Notwithstanding the horror of what has happened, Francesco DiNardo has tried to go on living a normal life. He moved back into the family home, cleaning up the mess and repainting the house. He has even remained at his job as manager at Parnigotti. Susie's mother, who was still alive at the time of the murders, stated that she has forgiven her granddaughter and hopes to see her again and help her as much as possible. Omar's parents, like Erika's father, have grimly stood by their son, and they have been so fazed by the publicity and morbid curiosity that they have moved away, changing both name and town, giving up the bar they had owned for years in their hometown of Novi Ligure. Erika had received a 16-year sentence and Omar 14 years. This already felt too short for the crime that was committed. This meant that Erika would be free by the time she was 32 and Omar 31. Erika would complete her sentence in 2017 and Omar in 2015. Originally, the couple was placed in the same juvenile prison, but so strong was the dynamic of the couple that within days, prison authorities moved Omar to a different jail in a different city, from Torino to Milano, in order to stop Erika communicating with him. Imagine then the indignation of the Italian public, with this double murder still maintaining a top place in recent Italian history for brutality, when both Erika and Omar were released much earlier due to good conduct, not even completing the meager initial prison sentence. Omar was released first on March 3, 2010. He has since moved to Tuscany, getting a job as a bartender and starting a family. He did sit for a widely televised interview with Matrix on October 5, 2011. In this interview, he expressed remorse for what he had done, saying that he now understands the difference between right and wrong and is no longer the same person he was. He puts the blame squarely on the shoulders of Erika, saying she planned this for months and talked incessantly to him about it, that if he loved her, he would do this with her, if he was a real man. He also claimed that she wanted to kill her father as well, that this was part of her original plan, and she was angry with him for not completing this part of the plan. He says he should have found another way to help her, that she desperately needed help. He said as well at the time he thought the reason she hated her family so much was a deep jealousy of her little brother and of the attention he received from her parents. Now looking back, he realizes that this was not a motive for murder, and there must be a much deeper problem inside of Erika. He says he continually has nightmares of that night and asks forgiveness from Erika's mother. Erika was released on December 5, 2011. She served a little over 10 years at a prison outside of Milan, where she obtained a philosophy degree. For the last few months before she was fully released, she lived at a special transitional community located near the beautiful Lago di Garda and in the middle of nature. After leaving this community, she still proclaimed her innocence and placed all responsibility for the massacre on Omar. The priest of the transitional community declared Erika had changed and that the responsibility for the crime was due to drug abuse. In the years after her release, she stayed close to her father, who had not only forgiven her but wanted to protect her from the consequences. She sat for interviews in January 2013 with several newspapers where she complained that she's unable to find work because everyone recognizes her and connects her to the double murder 12 years earlier. She is recently married and started a family and lives in the area near the transitional community, near the Lago di Garda. She and her family keep a very low profile. The Italian public has by no means forgotten what happened 22 years ago, and though she will never lead a normal life, we can hope her children will be able to have somewhat of a normal life. An interesting interview was made by Vanity Fair with Livia Locci, the deputy prosecutor of Torino. She coordinated the investigation at the time. Here's what she says about those days. All of Italy was in shock. Humanly, I could not help but identify with that woman killed with her little son. Professionally, I had to remain detached and try to understand what had led to that tragedy. What has always struck me is the fact that there wasn't a moment of hesitation. The two teenagers completed their work with incredible determination. The only hesitation was when they decided to give up their intention to kill their father too, because they were tired. They couldn't take it anymore. She also spoke of the motive or of the assumed motive. She said, the declared motive was that the two wanted to experience a dimension of absolute freedom in that house, where they would be alone since the project was to kill their father too. However, both already enjoyed a great deal of freedom. The deeper reasons are to be found in the relationship that Erika had with her parents and especially with her mother. There were already alarm bells that weren't picked up on because the relationships were very horizontal. There was no authentic communication. There were attempts by her mother to open a dialogue, but they were inadequate for the purpose. As mentioned earlier, this case has been analyzed by experts in criminal psychology. According to Adolfo Ceretti, a criminologist who helped prepare a psychoanalytic assessment of Erika and Omar for the state prosecutor's office, Adolfo believes that a partial explanation of their crime may be found in the all-exclusive vacuum of their relationship, one lived out against the background of a world that bombards children with the exaltation of absolute freedom, of rights and expectations, but not duties or responsibilities. The scariest part of this crime is the inability to assign a motive that fits the vicious attack. Parents began to second-guess their parenting decisions and wonder what is normal. The people of Novi Ligure were so ready to try and forget and move past this horrible crime, they even changed the name of the street where it happened. Thank you for listening to Italian True Crime, the English language podcast for Italophiles interested in lesser-known Italian crime and murder stories. Researching this crime, certain numbers stood out that paint a picture of how tragic and sad this crime was. 22 years ago, this crime took place. So tragic and horrendous, Italians still speak of it as if it just happened. 16, the age of the murderers. 97, the number of stab wounds between the mother and son. And 10, the number of years in prison to pay for such a brutal and savage crime.